Hello and welcome to BH Media Group's training on creating a harassment-free workplace. This training will focus on your role in preventing and eliminating discrimination and harassment in the workplace. Your facilitators today are Jamie Wagner and Vicki Broussard. Here at the BH Media Group, we have a policy that prohibits discriminatory or harassing behavior. Other inappropriate conduct is also prohibited under the policy. Today you'll get a chance to test your ability to spot inappropriate conduct when we go over some workplace scenarios. You'll learn to identify the kinds of actions you need to avoid and how you should respond to discriminatory, harassing, or otherwise offensive conduct. You'll also learn how your supervisor will respond to a report of inappropriate behavior and how you as a manager or supervisor should respond to a report of inappropriate behavior. BH Media Group is committed to ensuring that all employees must be treated with dignity and respect. Each and every employee is expected to help maintain a non-discriminatory workplace. Each employee should avoid words and actions that contribute to discriminatory or harassing treatment of others. Here's why. Federal law gives employees the right to work in an environment that is free from discrimination and harassment on the basis of race, religion, gender, genetic information, national origin, age, disability, or veteran status. In some states, employees are also entitled to be free from discrimination and harassment because of their sexual preference and gender identity. Regardless of the state law, BH Media Group has adopted a policy of not discriminating on the basis of sexual preference or gender identity. Discrimination and harassment can have a detrimental financial impact on a company, and while it usually doesn't happen and depends on the nature of the conduct, a harassment victim may also sue the harasser directly for assault, battery, or intentional infliction of emotional distress. If found at fault, the harasser may have to pay punitive damages as well as legal fees out of his or her pocket. A hostile work environment diminishes the effectiveness and well-being of everyone exposed to it. Unnecessary hostility can undermine trust, impede teamwork, hinder communication, reduce productivity, and deprive you and your organization of the benefits that come from a diversity of experiences and beliefs. Workplace discrimination and harassment is very disruptive. It limits the ability of the victim, and often his and her coworkers, to contribute to the organization and creates a stressful working environment. As a manager or supervisor, you have a responsibility to cultivate a non-discriminatory workplace. Not only are you duty-bound to avoid engaging in discriminatory or harassing behavior yourself, but you are in a position to lead by example, to encourage respectful behavior, and to take whatever actions are necessary to stop discriminatory, harassing, or demeaning conduct when it does occur. If harassment is openly practiced in the workplace or well known among the employees and management fails to act, the organization will be liable should the victim sue. When a member of the management team knows or should have known about discriminatory or harassing conduct and does nothing, it appears that the organization endorses or approves of the conduct. That can cause your organization as much legal trouble as if you yourself engaged in discriminatory or harassing conduct. Discriminatory conduct is any form of inappropriate behavior, including harassment that undermines the employment relationship, that interferes with the employee's ability to perform his or her job, or that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment based on employees' protected characteristics. Employees are expected to act in a respectful, professional, and non-discriminatory manner. No one should be subjected to verbal or physical conduct that is demeaning or that shows hostility to another because of his or her race, religion, gender, national origin, age, disability, etc. Sexual harassment is one form of discriminatory conduct, but it is not the only type of conduct that is inappropriate and prohibited under the policy. We'll take a closer look at various types of conduct. You'll be hearing about both discrimination and harassment. Don't get caught up in distinguishing between the two. Rather, focus on what it is and is not appropriate conduct for the workplace. Our company discrimination and harassment policy prevention includes the following key provisions. Treat others with respect, report improper conduct, reports are kept confidential, violators will be disciplined, and do not fear retaliation. We'll look at these provisions in more detail. Treat others with respect. In order to ensure that discrimination does not occur, all employees are expected to treat one another with respect. Even if the behavior is not considered unlawful activity, but a reasonable person would find it offensive and inappropriate for the workplace, it violates the policy against harassing, discriminatory, or inappropriate conduct. Report improper conduct. Employees are strongly urged to immediately report any harassing, discriminatory, or inappropriate conduct. With your help in identifying problematic behavior, we can take steps to remedy the problem and prevent future occurrences. Our policy explains how and to whom improper conduct should be reported. Follow established procedures for bringing any occurrence to the attention of management. There may be several avenues to choose from telling your supervisor, telling a designated alternate contact, or telling a member of the Human Resources Department. All reports of harassing, discriminatory, or inappropriate conduct will be taken seriously and promptly investigated. Reports are kept confidential. All reports of inappropriate, discriminatory conduct will be treated as confidentially as possible. Disclosure of information about a report and its surrounding investigation will be made on a strict need-to-know basis. Everyone involved in the investigation, including the person making the report, the accused, and the witnesses, will be asked to keep investigation discussions strictly confidential. Violators will be disciplined. Employees who engage in harassing, discriminatory, or inappropriate conduct are subject to discipline up to and including termination of employment. Any employee who is found to have violated the harassment-free workplace will be subject to discipline. Discipline may vary based on the severity of the offense up to and including termination. Do not fear retaliation. No one reporting inappropriate discriminatory conduct will be disciplined or retaliated against, even if a report is made in good faith and is later determined to be unfounded. Employees who engage in retaliatory conduct are subject to discipline up to and including termination. Retaliation against employees who assist in investigation reports of improper conduct is also prohibited. Managers and supervisors' role. As a manager or supervisor, you must know and thoroughly understand the harassment-free workplace policy in order to apply it. Reread the policy on a regular basis, keep a copy handy, and consult it when situations of inappropriate conduct arise. Remember, as a manager, you will be held to a higher standard. Remember, you are responsible for protecting the organization. If you have a reason to believe that harassing, discriminatory, or inappropriate conduct is occurring, you cannot ignore it. This includes any casual conversations you may have with an employee, such as just between you and me, or I don't want you to do anything about it. Follow procedure for handling a report or directing it to the proper persons for investigation and follow-up. If you fail to report harassing, discriminatory, or inappropriate conduct, you will be subject to discipline. Best advice, involve HR as soon as you are aware of any situations.
Now that you know a little bit about our harassment-free workplace policy and your role in preventing discriminatory and harassing conduct in the workplace, we're going to take a closer look at what it means. It's important to remember that the policy applies both to discrimination prohibited by law and to discrimination or otherwise inappropriate behavior in any form. Legally speaking, discrimination and harassment are two separate concepts. Discriminatory conduct is any form of verbal or physical conduct that undermines the employment relationship, that interferes with an employee's ability to perform his or her job, or that creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment based on an employee's protected characteristics. These include race, sex, age, national origin, religion, etc. It includes harassment, which consists of any conduct that degrades or shows hostility to another because of his or her race, religion, gender, national origin, age, disability, veteran status, sexual preference, gender identity, or any other category protected by law. Conduct that is illegal under the employment discrimination laws is not the only conduct prohibited by our policy. You will be held to a higher standard of behavior as BH Media Group employees. You should know that harassment of our employees by persons outside of the organization, for example, customers, vendors, contractors, etc., can amount to illegal discrimination if an employer knows that it's going on but does nothing to stop it. Illegal harassment because of a protected characteristic occurs when the harassment is enough to create a hostile work environment. A hostile environment exists when an employee has been subjected to verbal or physical conduct that shows hostility because of a protected characteristic, and the conduct has the purpose or effect of interfering with the employee's work performance or opportunities, or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Verbal abuse does not have to result in psychological harm to cause a hostile work environment. It need only be reasonably perceived as hostile or abusive. An employee who is offended by the harassment of others should have the same rights as an employee who is the target of harassing conduct. The company must take reasonable measures to control or eliminate the open expression of prejudices in the workplace. To do so, we need to monitor employees' behavior toward one another, as well as how managers and supervisors treat subordinates. Every employee at all levels of the organization has an obligation to do his or her part to create a non-discriminatory workplace and to help ensure that it stays that way. So now we're going to go over some types of conduct. Our policy prohibits all forms of harassing, discriminatory, or otherwise inappropriate conduct. Prohibited conduct need not rise to the level of illegal discrimination to be covered by the policy. Inappropriate conduct can show itself in a number of ways. Verbal abuse. Perhaps the most common type of discriminatory conduct is verbal abuse. In its most direct form, verbal harassment consists of epithets, slurs, or jokes directed against individuals because of protected characteristics. Verbally berating a coworker can be discriminatory if it is based on membership in a protected class. It is inappropriate and prohibited under our policy. It can also amount to harassment if it interferes with an employee's work performance or creates an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Physical contact. Inappropriate physical contact may include obstructing a person's path, pushing, shoving, grabbing, or touching. Physical contact is frequently associated with intimidation, which is always inappropriate. Physical contact of a sexual nature is in a special category and has its own unique set of rules. If you have questions relating specifically to sexual harassment, consult a member of the Human Resources team. Sabotage. Destruction of a person's equipment or work product is inappropriate and discriminatory when done because a person belongs to a protected class. It could also amount to illegal harassment. Graffiti. Written derogatory remarks are just as inappropriate as spoken remarks. Demeaning or insulting drawings, cartoons, slogans, and symbols can also create an offensive environment and are inappropriate. Refusal to cooperate. Another form of inappropriate conduct is a refusal to assist or cooperate in work that requires a team effort. The conduct is discriminatory and may be harassment when directed at a person because of a protected characteristic. Intimidation. Specific acts of intimidation do not have to be frequent to create a hostile environment. A single instance of particularly severe or offensive conduct can be harassment. For example, an African American employee who finds a noose hung over his work area could be the target of racial harassment on the basis of that one act. Disciplinary action would be commensurate with the severity of the conduct. In this case, what do you think would be the disciplinary action? Acts of intimidation have a threatening quality. The threats may be explicit or implicit. Threatening conduct is serious. When based on a protected characteristic, it may constitute unlawful harassment, but it also violates our violence in the workplace policy, whatever the basis for the underlying hostility. Such behavior is highly inappropriate and never tolerated. Isolated instances. Isolated or minor instances of inappropriate conduct will be dealt with in accordance with their severity. Here are some examples of inappropriate conduct in the workplace: telling racial jokes, pushing or grabbing another, destroying someone else's work, drawing pictures that are offensive, unwillingness to work as a team. Discriminatory or harassing behavior by supervisors and managers may take additional forms. Such behavior is especially inappropriate and will not be tolerated. Assignments. Intentionally only assigning persons in a protected class to menial or exceptionally strenuous job tasks, making them do the quote-unquote grunt work, is discriminatory and has been recognized as a mode of unlawful harassment. Surveillance. Discrimination and harassment may also take the form of special surveillance or spying of a coworker or worker on the basis of a protected characteristic. Don't use race, religion, gender, national origin, age, disability, sexual preference, gender identity, or veteran status as a reason to pay closer attention to a person's absences, tardiness, or personal time on the telephone, for example. Training. A refusal to train or substandard or inadequate training directed at persons because of membership in a protected class is also discriminatory and can amount to harassment. A person who is discharged for poor work performance may be entitled to reinstatement if the reason for his or her poor performance was discrimination in training. Discipline. Excessive and inconsistently harsh discipline based on a protected category is discriminatory conduct and may be harassment. Finally, forced quit. Subjecting an employee to conditions that are so intolerable that a reasonable person would feel compelled to resign is a form of harassment as well, and under these circumstances, the fact that the employee has voluntarily quit is not a defense to discrimination charges. Let's talk about conduct based on these protected traits. Gender-based conduct. It can be defined as inappropriate conduct that is based on a person's gender. Suppose that a woman reports for work at an all-male construction site. The men don't want a woman doing a man's job, so they lock the gate and alter the authorized personnel only sign to read authorized men only. The woman was clearly the object of hostility that interfered with her ability to work based on her gender. The men's behavior is inappropriate and a violation of policy. Here's another example. An advertising creative team is meeting with a client. As a female artist begins her presentation, a male colleague interrupts and asks her to fetch him a cup of coffee. This course of conduct is also inappropriate. Racial and ethnic conduct. Inappropriate conduct based on race or ethnicity ranges from open hostility, such as name-calling and racial slurs, to sending a message that a person of a particular race or ethnicity are inferior and unwelcome. For example, the placement of a Ku Klux Klan literature in an employee's work area. It also ranges to subtle put-downs. Religious conduct. Religious harassment may occur if an employer allows someone to preach a particular religion to workers or to condemn another's religion. Although a coworker's simple invitation to church services may not be inappropriate in itself, repeated unwelcome invitations could create a hostile environment. As a supervisor or manager, you need to be particularly careful about advocating religious ideas. Your position in the organization could make such conduct especially intimidating. For example, a supervisor might create a hostile environment if employees are forced to attend staff meetings opened by prayer or religious talks, or if performance reviews are linked with religious conversations. Age-based conduct. Older workers may be objects of harassing or inappropriate conduct. Consider these examples. Mark is 65 years old and works on a loading dock. Mark's coworkers are always making jokes about the old man and leaving the largest and heaviest boxes for him. They also changed the computer settings for the shipment tracking system so that the information was displayed in extremely small print. Disability-based conduct. Hostile or demeaning conduct based on disability is also inappropriate. An example of inappropriate disability-based conduct would be if an employee with schizophrenia is constantly referred to as a lunatic and a nutcase. Coworkers go out of their way to put the individual in stressful interpersonal situations that aggravate the mental condition. Use of the R word is also inappropriate. For an example, referring to someone in a wheelchair as a chair jockey or purposely letting the door slam on them instead of holding it would be an example of disability-based conduct.
Okay, we're going to check in and see what your knowledge is. The first question I have is, can non-minority employees experience racial or ethnic harassment? The answer is yes. Workers who are offended by the harassment of others have an equal right to work in an environment that is free from harassing or discriminatory conduct. And non-minority workers themselves may become a target for harassment and discrimination through association, as may be the case with an employee who is harassed because of an interracial marriage or friendship with a minority coworker. Caucasian workers can be subjected to racial harassment, particularly in a predominantly non-white workplace. Next question. Whose viewpoint is considered in determining whether the work environment is hostile? Harassment is based on the victim's point of view. In other words, conduct is treated as hostile when the person on the receiving end reasonably regards it as hostile or offensive. It is not a question of whether or not the person engaging in the conduct would consider the behavior offensive. There are two lessons to learn from this. Lesson number one, if you are unsure about how another person would react to your conduct, don't do it. You don't want to take a chance that another would find your conduct offensive. Lesson number two, if someone behaves in a manner that you would find offensive, don't assume that the person knows the conduct is offensive. First, explain that you will find the conduct to be offensive, and that if it continues, you will bring your concerns to management. Then follow procedures outlined in your company's harassment-free workplace policy to do so. Next question. Is it okay to call an older worker Gramps? It depends. The practice would be inappropriate if it reflected age-based hostility, was demeaning, or offensive. But if Gramps was used as a title of respect, or if it was said in conjunction with congratulations on the birth of a grandchild, there may be nothing wrong with calling someone Gramps. If you're unsure as to how the title would be received, it is best to avoid it. Certainly, you must respect a coworker's wishes if he asked you not to call him Gramps. Next question. Are discrimination and harassment prohibited only in the workplace? While employment-related discrimination occurs usually in the everyday workplace, it can also occur outside the normal work environment. And examples include at employer-sponsored social events, for example, at a party or a sporting event, at private locations not related to work, for example, after-work get-togethers at a bar, restaurant, or hotel, at customer or vendor locations, for example, during a sales call at a customer's office, and also in cyberspace, for example, while checking emails or accessing a work-related online bulletin board using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media. Next question. Can impersonating another employee's speech or mannerisms create a hostile environment? Verbally or physically impersonating another employee can create a hostile work environment, especially if this is done in conjunction with other potentially objectionable conduct. Examples include mimicking a Russian immigrant's accent while criticizing his work performance, pretending to use a cane while walking behind an older coworker, or duplicating the distinctive speech pattern of a person with a cognitive disability while talking about the person in front of other coworkers. You need to ask yourself, now that you have an idea of the kinds of conduct that are covered by our harassment-free workplace policy, let's take a look at how you can contribute to a respectful work environment. Your conduct will be evaluated in the context in which it occurred. Sometimes it's a tough call as to whether conduct is unlawful harassment or discrimination. Courts and lawyers fight about it all the time. So we'll focus on the appropriateness. You don't want to cross the line from respectful conduct to inappropriate behavior. A simple rule to follow is that if something you do or say can be offensive to someone, don't do or say it. A hostile environment is determined by the perception of the victim, regardless of the perpetrator's subjective intent. Therefore, you will not always be able to know whether or not something you do or say was perceived as hostile or offensive. This isn't as hard as it sounds. The victim's perspective must be reasonable. So it's not your fault if someone unreasonably takes offense. Still, the best way to avoid misunderstanding is to diligently practice respect. Pause before you speak or act and ask yourself some questions. Would you want the same thing said or done in front of your spouse, sibling, child, or parent? Would you normally say or do the same thing to a member of your own sex, age, race, religion, or heritage? Does it need to be said or done at all? Does it serve any useful business purpose? Would you want it to be seen on the 6 o'clock news saying or doing it?
Okay, so now we're going to talk about 5 common issues that you may encounter in the workplace. 1, badgering. Absolutely no badgering allowed. The mere fact that a coworker asks you a question is not inappropriate itself. If a coworker asks you about your age or health problems and you don't want to discuss it, politely say so and ask that the topic not be brought up again. You could handle an unwelcome invitation to pray with a coworker in the same manner. Politely decline and state that you don't wish to be asked again. Persistence is inappropriate, however, and eventually can be considered harassment. If, despite your request to avoid the subject, a coworker continues to bring up a topic that you don't wish to discuss, report the situation to management by following the guidelines in your employer's harassment-free workplace policy. On the other side of the equation, do not repeatedly ask coworkers about age, health, religion, or other topics they wish to avoid. If the person says no when you first bring up the subject, don't persist. Let it be. Avoid inappropriate humor. Although humor in the workplace can have a positive effect on working relationships, inappropriate humor may have the opposite result. Humor that is directed at minorities, ethnic groups, religious sects, older workers, gay or lesbian employees, or persons with disabilities is insensitive and may be perceived by some as offensive and may create a hostile work environment. When interacting with coworkers, whether verbally, on paper, or online, exercise good judgment. Remember, if what you're about to send out in email is something that you would not say in front of your child, parent, or religious leader, don't do it. Never bring offensive material to work. You should not have any offensive or insensitive material in the workplace, even if it is in your own personal space. It is best to keep this material at home. Offensive material may include sexually explicit materials, for example, a bikini calendar, photographs of racially insensitive subjects such as burning crosses, lynchings, or swastikas, or any hate propaganda. Interacting with a person with a disability. Don't let condescension or pity obstruct communication when interacting with a person with a disability. Speak to a person with a disability just as you would speak to anyone else. Focus on a person's abilities, not his or her disabilities. And finally, no bullying allowed. There will be no inappropriate conduct or comment by a person towards a worker that the person knew or reasonably ought to have known would cause that worker to be humiliated or intimidated.
All employees are responsible for preventing harassing, discriminatory, or offensive behavior. What exactly does this responsibility require of you? Certainly you need to refrain from engaging in inappropriate behavior yourself by practicing respect in the workplace. But an employee's role doesn't stop there. You need to take certain steps should you find yourself in a situation that is unacceptable. What should you do? If you believe that a coworker, manager, or even a person outside of the organization is engaging in discriminatory, offensive, or inappropriate behavior, you are strongly encouraged to follow these guidelines. Communicate your feelings. Communicating feelings of discomfort can prevent behavior that is inappropriate, yet innocent, from becoming harassing and overly offensive. This way, problems can be corrected before they get out of hand, but do it politely and respectfully. Although workers have a right to a harassment-free work environment, they do not have the right to verbally or physically assault others who behave in a harassing, discriminatory, or offensive manner. To do so exposes the victim to disciplinary action right along with the perpetrator. Consider the case of an employee who is being racially taunted. Provoked, the employee responds by breaking the harasser's jaw. Both now will be disciplined or terminated based on the severity of their conduct. Report inappropriate conduct. Every employee is strongly urged to immediately report harassing, discriminatory, or offensive workplace conduct. When inappropriate workplace conduct is reported immediately, your employer can take steps to stop it in its tracks. As a reminder, you must take action even for off-the-record reports. Not only is it critical that such conduct is reported, but it must be reported to the right people. Merely telling a coworker about an incident of inappropriate behavior will not be enough to alert your employer to the problem. It is important to report inappropriate behavior to management and human resources. Do not fear retaliation by management. Our company takes a strong stand against retaliatory conduct. Employees may not be retaliated against for reporting inappropriate behavior, as long as the report is made in good faith. If at any time you believe that you are being retaliated against because you reported harassing, discriminatory, or other inappropriate conduct, you are urged to contact human resources or a member of the management team immediately. Do not let fear of retaliation stop you from reporting the conduct or behavior. Do not fear coworkers. You must not keep inappropriate conduct a secret out of fear that coworkers will become angry. Our policy strictly prohibits retaliation against a reporting employee by anyone in the organization, whether a supervisor or coworker. We will take all necessary steps to ensure that other persons do not retaliate against anyone who in good faith reports inappropriate conduct. Anyone who engages in retaliation will be subject to discipline up to and including discharge. As a manager or supervisor, you must lead your organization's effort to prevent and eliminate harassing, discriminatory, or offensive conduct. You are a role model for your subordinates and the eyes and ears of the organization. You must act with the highest degree of professionalism and respect and inspire others to do the same. You can achieve those goals by following these guidelines on actions to avoid. Don't make employment decisions based on factors that are not job-related. Don't engage in inappropriate conduct. Don't look the other way when you see someone behaving inappropriately. Don't discount your suspicions that inappropriate conduct is occurring. Don't ignore a report of inappropriate conduct because you think the person doing the reporting is being oversensitive. Don't delay efforts to eliminate inappropriate conduct. Act immediately. Don't allow retaliation to occur. Don't let the person who reported the situation walk away frustrated. Once inappropriate conduct is reported and we are aware of the problem, an immediate internal investigation will be conducted. The goal of the investigation is to gather all of the facts so that we can determine whether inappropriate conduct did or did not occur. Let's look at a few things you should know about the process so you'll know what to expect should you ever become involved in an investigation. Once an investigation begins, the facts will be kept as confidential as possible and revealed only on a strict need-to-know basis. Everyone involved in the investigation, including the person making the report, the accused, and the witnesses, will be asked to keep investigatory discussions strictly confidential. Prompt action will be taken if inappropriate conduct is found. The action will be designed to correct the behavior and to prevent it from happening again. Corrective action may include an apology from an unintended remark, if appropriate, additional education about appropriate workplace behavior, or disciplinary action such as warning, reprimand, suspension, or even discharge. Once the investigation has been completed, those who were involved will be told of the results of the investigation and whether or not corrective action was taken. However, the person who reported the conduct is not told the particulars of any disciplinary action. The person who reported the conduct will be encouraged to let us know immediately if the behavior continues or if there are any further problems.
Now we'll focus on your responsibilities as a manager or supervisor. One of the biggest mistakes that a manager or supervisor can make is to ignore or respond improperly to harassment, discrimination, or inappropriate conduct in the workplace. Let's examine how you, as a manager or supervisor, need to respond to a report of inappropriate workplace conduct. Reporting harassing, discriminatory, or offensive conduct can be a hard thing for an employee to do. It's your job to make it as painless as possible. Effectively responding to a report of inappropriate conduct requires you to act as a leader. First, listen. In order to effectively address a report of inappropriate conduct, you must be a good listener. You must create an atmosphere where employees feel comfortable raising their concerns. This means you must take every report seriously, no matter how silly or insignificant you personally believe the behavior to be. Remember, the issue is whether the person reporting the conduct in good faith finds the conduct to be hostile or offensive. Don't assume that someone is being too sensitive. Try to look at it from the accuser's perspective. To be a good listener, you may have to read between the lines. Listen for code words when someone tells you about someone else's behavior. For instance, does he or she feel uncomfortable or uneasy? Is the employee asking not to work with someone because they don't get along? Does the employee say that a coworker treats me funny, acts as if I don't exist, or acts weird? Encourage. When an employee comes to you to report inappropriate workplace behavior, the first thing you should do is thank the employee for coming forward. Try to make the employee feel calm and comfortable about talking to you while maintaining a professional and objective attitude. Acknowledge the employee's feelings. Reassure him or her that the information will be kept as confidential as possible, but not secret. Also reassure the victim that no retaliation will occur in response to a good faith report of inappropriate conduct. Ask questions. Get answers to who, what, where, when, how, and why. Who did what, to whom, when, where, how, and why. Other important questions are there any witnesses? Is there any documentation, such as letters, notes, or email messages that might support the claim? Is the employee afraid of retaliation from the perpetrator? Also, find out what the employee wants to happen to resolve the problem, but do not promise that the action will be taken. Document. Immediately create a written record of the employee's statement. Do not wait to document. It's very important that records of inappropriate conduct reflect exactly what was said. Ask the reporting employee to review and sign your documentation to reflect that it is an accurate summary of what the employee has reported. If he or she is unwilling to do so, take note of that fact. If you need assistance, ask HR to sit in to document the conversation. If at all possible, have the employee provide his or her own detailed written account of what took place and have him or her sign that and date it. Explain. Explain your employer's policy to the employee. Let the employee know that you will maintain his or her confidence as much as possible, but that you have to report the conduct through the proper channels. Be sure to assure the employee that there will be no retaliation or negative employment actions taken against the employee for making a report. Answer any questions the employee may have. You can also ask HR to be present to explain company policy and answer questions. And report. Immediately report the conversation to Human Resources as outlined in our harassment-free workplace policy. Never, under any circumstances, try to handle the situation alone. After an incident of harassing, discriminatory, or inappropriate behavior has occurred and management has taken the appropriate action to correct the situation, it's a good idea to separately follow up with the accuser and the witnesses to ensure that the behavior has stopped and that no retaliation is taking place. Now that you know the responsibilities of both employees and supervisors in the prevention of workplace harassment and other offensive behavior, please ensure you familiarize yourself with the additional resources available, as well as your local or corporate HR team members. At this time, this concludes our training session for today. You should have access to or copies of the FAQs document and a copy of the harassment-free workplace policy.